you are watching this video, then it's probably because you didn't do so well on this section of the test right here, which I'm going to call section 1D, because that was the lesson, and it's number 11 through 14. So 4 questions, 4 points. I'm going to let you retake this section separately from 1E, which is going to be all the symmetry stuff. Okay? So lesson 1D, just finding x and y intercepts, one separate part of your test that you can retake. So remember, to find the x-intercept, it's always going to have a y value of 0. No matter where on the x-axis it is, it's got a y value of 0. So I'm going to plug in 0 for y and see what happens. And then for the y-intercept, that's going to be on the y-axis. It's always going to have an x value of 0. What's the y value? Well, I might have to find out, but I can do a little bit of algebra. So here I'm going to plug in 0 for x. X-intercept, plug in 0 for y. Y-intercept, plug in 0 for x. Okay, so number 11. Let's find the x-intercept first. So I said for the x-intercept, I'm going to plug in a 0 for y. 0 equals the square root of x plus 9 minus 4. Now I have to solve for x. That'll give me the x coordinate. So I might add 4 to the other side. And what's the inverse of a square root? Well, it's squaring something. So I'm going to square both sides. That would give me 16 equals x plus 9. And when I square both sides, I don't have to do a plus or minus. There's only one possible number I can get when I square 4. It's always going to be 16. Now I need to subtract the 9 over. That's going to give me 7. So 7 equals x. Or in other words, 7, 0 is my x-intercept. And my y-intercept is going to be y equals, so I'm going to plug in 0 for x. 0 plus 9 minus 4. What's 0 plus 9? We've already got y by itself. We don't need to rearrange. We just need to simplify. So y is already solved for. It's equal to this. But this should just be equal to some number. So let's simplify it. What's 0 plus 9? Well, I'm pretty sure it's 9. Okay. Can I simplify it more? What's the square root of 9? It's 3. And again, this isn't an unknown where we're taking the square root of both sides of an equation. We don't have to do plus or minus. The square root of 9 is simply 3. And what's 3 minus 4? It's negative 1. So that would be, in other words, 0, negative 1. That would be the y-intercept. And if you want to, graph that function. See if it actually crosses in the places that you said it did. Just type it in your calculator. Does it cross in those places? It does. But when you're taking the test, do that. Check yourself. Check your answers. Number 12. X-intercept. I'm going to plug in a 0 for y. 0 equals x cubed plus 3. Then I'm going to subtract 3, and I get negative 3 equals x cubed. And the inverse of cubing something is the cube root. So I get the cube root, which is a square root with a little 3 out there, equals x. Again, I don't have to do a plus or minus because this is an odd power. And so essentially, is there some number that you can multiply by itself 3 times and get negative 3? Well, yeah, but the only name for that number, and I'm going to move the negative to the outside. You don't have to do that. But it's the cube root of 3, and it's negative. There's not a simpler way to write it. You could plug it in your calculator and get the decimal, but we want the exact answer, not the decimal. So it's the cube root of 3, and you could write it either of these ways. That would be fine. Now for the y-intercept, deviant, I'm going to plug in 0 for x, so y equals 0 cubed plus 3. I'm pretty sure 0 cubed is still 0, so y equals 3. Okay, so that's my y-intercept, x-intercept. Let's look at number 13. On number 13, we've got x squared plus y squared equals 16. If you think about what this graph looks like, maybe you'll think, hey, that's a circle. How many x and y intercepts should it have? Well, it should have 2 of each. And so, let's see what happens. For the x-intercept, I'm going to plug in a 0 for y. No. Yes. Sorry. I questioned myself. Okay, I'm going to plug in a 0 for y. That's x squared plus 0 squared equals 16. That's 0, so essentially it's just x squared equals 16, which means I need to take the square root of both sides of the equation. And when I do this one specific thing, take the square root of both sides of an equation, I have to do the plus or minus. That's when we have to do it. We're solving for x, and we're taking the square root of both sides of an equation. So it's plus or minus 4. That's 2 answers. You could write it out separately if you wanted to. And to be clear, that's not a point. This is a set. It's these two different points. Just leave it like that. It's fine. Now the y-intercept, we're going to plug in a 0 for x. Okay. So essentially we have y squared equals 16. Same thing, we take the square root of both sides of an equation and we have a variable in there. That's where we get the plus or minus. So we have 2 x-intercepts, 2 y-intercepts, and that makes sense if you know what a circle looks like. Okay, number 14. X-intercept. We're going to plug in 0 for y. That's 3x minus 7 equals 0. Add 7 to both sides, and that's 3x equals 7. Divide by 3, x equals 7/3. Done. Y-intercept. Plug in a 0 for x. 3 times 0 minus 7 equals y. Again, much like we saw in number 11, the y is already by itself. We don't have to get the y by itself. We just need to simplify this other side. So 3 times 0 is 0. 0 minus 7 is negative 7. Negative 7 equals y. And that is the end of section 1D. And again, I'm going to grade this separately from section 1E, which is going to be the symmetry stuff. So if you just messed up this part, you can just retake that part. Hopefully, if you didn't understand any of this, come see the tutorials. And then remember, you need to do the homework from that section, and you also need to correct this part, and maybe some other stuff. Look on Google Classroom. Everything is up there.